Samurai Champloo is one of the most stylish anime ever made. Lo-fi hip-hop and samurai combine into a visual and auditory feast. But does the second half actually fall apart under its own weight? In part 2 of our Ghost of Yōtei Inspirations series for Samurai Champloo, we break down episodes 14 through 26 and ask, is it a masterpiece of style or one of the most frustrating anime endings ever?
Samurai Champloo.
Here we go with another episode of Nerd Legion. This is our second episode on Samurai Champloo because we couldn't actually get through all 26 episodes in one show. So this will be about episodes 14 to 26 and our final thoughts. The reason why we're doing this is because we are counting down to the Ghost of Yōtei launch, and DoA and I will be working with some other people on a collaborative review of the game when it comes out. So head on over to Last Free Nation Gaming on YouTube, which is our gaming channel, where we did some Wildgate content previously, if you guys want to check that out. But we're looking at all of the cinematic influences on Ghost of Yōtei. So also take a look at the samurai movies we're watching. We'll be Lone Wolf and Cub next week, but we've already covered Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, Miike's 13 Assassins, and Lady Snowblood, all of which are great movies. So be sure to look at those as part of this Ghost of Yōtei Inspirations arc as well. Exciting stuff, because there's going to be a Watanabe mode named after Shinichiro Watanabe, the director of Samurai Champloo, and that means that you get charming lo-fi beats hand-picked by Watanabe as you wander around Hokkaidō in Ghost of Yōtei.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that, but mostly for the lo-fi. I will say, I feel bad saying this, but I think I like Samurai Champloo a little bit less now with my second watch through than I did before. I like, my memory of the show was like, I guess maybe I had like rose-colored, glasses on, but they were functional glasses, unlike jeans. And so now they have been revealed to show that the show is not as good as I thought it was.
Is that
what
right?
do you think? That's my opinion. I don't hate the show. I don't think it's terrible. I don't even think it's bad, but I don't think it's as good as I remember it being. How about you?
So I was encouraged by our start and our first 13 episode watch through, because I thought it has some really strong ideas. It has some cool themes going on. Is it going to deliver in the end? And the answer is no.
It does not.
I mean, you mentioned that this was kind of written, it was freestyled in a hip hop way as they went along. Apparently. Maybe they didn't exactly know who the Sunflower Samurai was, but
they didn't. They definitely didn't. That's been stated.
Yeah, and I think when we look at this show, there are some really strong arcs, and they do some cool stuff with character development, and there are some moments in the last 13 episodes where I think we got some really interesting storylines. I particularly liked the Elegy of Entrapment episodes with the blind woman Sarah.
And those were a little bit better.
Yeah, where they kind of delved more into Jin's past, and they set up, I think, a really interesting storyline about the Shogun hunting them as they looked for the Sunflower Samurai, which makes you think, oh, this is going to come to some sort of spectacular conclusion, but unfortunately it does not.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Which really shouldn't be surprising. I mean, when you've really done no setup of a main storyline, in the first half of your show, and then you just kind of cobble something dramatic together for the last 3 episodes, it doesn't really land, right? Because we're like, okay, this is happening. It all just feels like it's kind of resolving, but we have a resolution without really any buildup, right? It's the very loosest of, oh, this is the reason everything is happening. Spoiler alert right off the bat, I found it super boring that the Sunflower Samurai ended up being her dad, and she just wanted to punch him in the face because she was mad about him leaving. I'm like, okay, that's your main motivation for this entire thing. All right. Sure. And then like that doesn't even happen. He's just like some sick dude who just dies immediately when she meets him. It's just
And says he
everything
misses
is
her, and then that's it.
it's like the most generic it's if you could imagine a resolution for this in the most generic way possible, that's kind of what happened, where it's like they all the creativity kind of fell away. I feel like that existed, and they just went as cookie cutter as possible, you know.
And not only that, but I really hate it when media introduces powerful antagonists that you've never seen before or heard of or had foreshadowed at all right at the end of the show. And it really makes it feel emotionally flat, because we get the end of Mugen's storyline, and all of a sudden there are these assassin characters that are introduced about his time on the two-parter between like season 1 and season 2, episode 13 and 14, but we never see these characters on the boat that explodes. Also, it's not really his fault that the boat explodes, so they're going after him for kind of the wrong reasons. And then on top of that, we get these characters who we have no emotional attachment to, and we're supposed to see this as some epic finale, but we don't care because we know nothing about these characters, and Mugen didn't intentionally do anything to them, so their vengeance just feels hollow. But then we get just this insane Deus Ex Machina where the crippled one in a wheelchair shoots him, and then wheelchair explodes. Yes, like Breaking Bad, just a wheelchair explosion. I can't believe I have seen a wheelchair bomb 2 times in fiction now. I didn't want to see it the first time when I watched
this
Breaking Bad.
This one came before Breaking Bad, though.
I don't care. I mean,
so maybe
I forgot that happened,
copy
but now,
Samurai Champloo? Oh yeah.
Now that I've seen it twice, I didn't want it 1 time, and I definitely didn't want it 2 times. And then
I didn't even think
purely
about that. That's
because
such a
of
good point.
plot armor, Mugen just lives. He just lives.
That's what is most aggravating about the end of the show, is that like you just know that the plot armor is just, feet thick for these characters at the end, where you just feel like they're not in any danger. They're getting beat up and stabbed and all that, but it's just like they just keep coming back, and they're going to, and you're like, are they actually going to kill him? But then you think, well, if they actually kill him, it just feels kind of lame, because they're dying to these guys that we've never really seen before, and they just show up and they're stronger. And like, okay, so of course they have to live, but then it's like, well, where's the threat? Where's the real drama to begin with, right? So
and we introduce Karya, who is this insane swordsman that we've never seen or heard of, and then he duels Jin, and the animation's really cool, but they duel, and then I guess Jin loses, and then he just Deus Ex Machina appears again at the end so they can stab each other, and then of course Jin lives.
Yeah, I don't like that bugged me the most, where he was like, there's only one technique that can beat him, and it's like, if I have to like take the sword and then I can finish him off, and you're like, okay, sure, I've seen this one before, then they both die. But it's like, no, in this one he can take it and it's okay, because he's got plot armor, he will live. The amount of like punishment Jin lives through is just not, it's not. And I know we go beyond the bounds of realism. We have a dude cutting through stone with like a flying chain scythe thing, right? So it's like, I know we've passed the bounds of realism, but it's to the point where the drama is gone, right? Where we don't feel any sort of tension. We're just sort of watching it play out. And it's really honestly a lot like a Marvel film, where it's like, oh, pretty colors, pretty lights, big fights, but no drama, no emotional attachment to any of this stuff.
I just love how they sat there writing this. They're like, what if we just introduced all of the ultimate antagonists in like the last 3 episodes? And also, that thing we've been building towards, the Sunflower Samurai. What if he was just Fu's dad and was lying in a bed dying, and there wasn't even a conversation or resolution to this? Wouldn't that be cool? And the answer is no.
And some guy walks up and kills him, and he's like, now I have to kill you too. And you're like, oh no, oh please. But we don't really mind if he does kill Fu, because we don't really like the character. I don't know. I've never liked Fu as a character the entire show. She doesn't have her motivation is very flimsy, in that she's trying to find this, obviously, there's a whole like, oh, sunflowers don't smell like anything, it's just supposed to be an aimless journey, blah blah. But her motivation doesn't seem flimsy, right? So if you have a character that's flimsy motivation, you have to give them other things. You have to make them capable. Is she capable? No, she's like one of the least capable protagonists in the history of anime. All she does is get captured or fall over or cry. Like, she can't do anything except eat. She can eat very well, but she can't do anything besides eat, apparently. And she's got a flying squirrel pet that shows up every once in a while when we need a moment of levity. But so she doesn't have any capability. She doesn't really have any good motivation. So then is she likable, right? You know, to use, and I'm kind of using Brandon Sanderson's sort of like I believe I'm getting it pretty right. His 3 sort of like pillars of character development, where it's like they can be up and down in certain areas in these 3 general categories, but they need to be good at something for them to be an intriguing character. And so the third one is just likability. And again, she's not really likable. You know, she has kind of dragged these 2 swordsmen along, and we don't really know why they're sticking around anymore. And you know, she sees bad things happen to people and go, oh, that's sad. But that doesn't really make her like significantly likable. Any normal person would see bad things happen to someone and be like, oh, that's sad, you know? So she doesn't have any extraordinary levels of likability. She doesn't really have any, you know, interesting motivations, and she's not capable at all. So what is she? Like, she is just she's kind of just a living MacGuffin to just drag Mugen and Jin along through these various scenarios. That's it. She's just a walking plot device.
But the problem with her being a walking plot device is that, as we discussed in the first place, there is no real reason why the characters Mugen and Jin would stick with her this entire time.
Yeah, and they kind of allude to like, oh, maybe we should just leave, and they try to leave a couple times, get brought back around. And you know, I know there's the underpinnings of the tone that like they're each trying to search for family, really, at the end of the day, you know, and they kind of find a family in each other.
But it's not very well explored is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that doesn't
you
really
don't
develop.
feel like that actually develops at any point in time.
It's just kind of like the last episode or 2 where it's like, well, now we're really putting it all on the line for our family, you know. But yeah, we don't really see that affection all that much until maybe like us, you know, maybe there's like a line or 2 here and there. And you know, it definitely feels like a series that was made up as it went along. That's definitely what it feels like. Having watched the entire thing, I absolutely believe what I read in that they wanted to just make it up as they went along, and that they didn't know who the Sunflower Samurai was at the end and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's also a bummer because I feel like as we get towards the end, there was more time to really explore and like finish this up properly. But I feel like they just wasted a bunch of the last few episodes, including the weird zombie episode. I don't know what the fuck was going on there. Like, I understand that they were referring to old Japanese events that were hundreds of years old. And I know I spoke a lot about Japanese historical context on the last one, but that one went well over my head. And then on top of that, then we get the baseball episode, which I will talk about historically, but like,
yeah,
I would have felt fine if that episode was in the first 13, but as it's literally right before the finale of the last 3 episodes, it tonally feels really inconsistent with what's about to happen, and also feels like insane filler for no reason.
Yes, it does. The baseball episode stands out for being ridiculously wacky. But that's about it, you know.
Like it would have been better in isolation. It was okay, but like the placement of it was offensive.
It's weird, but like the zombie thing, like I watched that episode and I'm like, oh, they're trying to do like their Samurai Champloo version of Mushroom Samba from Cowboy Bebop.
Sure, okay.
Remember the episode where they all ingest mushrooms and go on like crazy trips?
Yeah,
but like, in that episode, everything that happens is relevant because all the trips that happen are kind of relevant to what we already know about the characters, right? Where this one, they eat some mushrooms, and we assume that they're hallucinating. I think that's like that's what I got out of it. Is I think they're supposed to be hallucinating because she's even like, wait, were those the right mushrooms?
Right.
And then they just go to like this zombie cavern.
But also it was done way worse than the drug sequence earlier in this series where Mugen was like in the burning field of marijuana, like flipping out, which was very cool, by the way. That was a fun moment we didn't mention in the last episode.
That's right. So they kind of already did that. So why did they even need to do that again? it does feel like they were just sort of trying to like get to the finish line, you know?
It felt like they're like, uh-oh, we need to work on these last episodes quick. Get filler. Like we have to just do something really fast in order so that we can focus on the end, but we didn't even focus on the end properly.
You know what's hilarious? I was watching, I watched like the last 5 or 6 episodes this afternoon, and I remember there being a baseball episode, but I must have accidentally clicked like next episode twice or something really fast, because I skipped it and I didn't even notice until like right now when I looked through the episodes and I was like, there was a baseball episode. I totally remember there being one, but I accidentally skipped it today. So that's the only one I didn't see. I'll admit I did not watch a baseball episode, but I will go off my memory from 20 something years ago and be like, and remember that being one of the more entertaining episodes in a vacuum.
So, I mean,
the baseball players just like swear a bunch, if I remember right?
Yes, it's a bunch of Americans. So what's funny about this is obviously they're trying to rewrite history a little bit, because if you guys don't know, one of the really big consequential actions in the late 1858, I believe, was when Admiral Perry, who was a American admiral, sailed into Edo Bay. So it's called Tokyo Bay now. Edo, it's now called Tokyo. And this was at the end of the Edo period. And he with his Black Fleet, these were steamships. So their technology was very far in advance of the Tokugawa shogunate. And because honestly, Japanese technology hadn't really progressed very much in the 250 odd years from 1603 until, 1858. So what happened is the Americans rocked up and said, hey, Japan, we're going to need you to open for trade, because they had closed off. Basically, they were a hermit kingdom. They had closed off to the outside world ever since the Tokugawa shogunate started. So the entirety of the Edo period in which Samurai Champloo takes place. And the Japanese really couldn't do anything about this, because Perry said, okay, I'm going to leave and then I'm going to come back in a few months. And he did. And he came back with more ships, and he said, okay, it's time to open your harbors. And they were like, oh, shit. And this actually resulted eventually in the end of the shogunate and the start of the Meiji Restoration. And it's because the Japanese realized that they couldn't exist in the modern world with their old feudal system. And so they had to deconstruct the feudal system, industrialize, and that's what later caused them to become an imperial power, because they were mimicking the Western imperial powers of the time. That's when they took over Taiwan. That's when they took over Korea. That's when they took over parts of China. And ultimately, they were defeated in World War II. So this was kind of this was the tipping point, the first domino that fell. And so in this baseball episode, what they're doing is they're saying, actually, the Americans were here earlier, and we beat them in a baseball game, and that's why they left until Admiral Perry came. And these arrogant Americans. But I mean, the whole thing is just so ridiculous, because all these baseball players are just dying during the game, and it's so silly, and they're like playing with dogs, and it's just like, oh my God, like, stop, please. Like, it's just, this fits earlier in the series. It really doesn't fit as the series is getting more serious, as it's focusing on the actual underlying long story. And both the zombie and the baseball episodes are sandwiched in between the good episode, the two-parter Elegy of Entrapment, where we get the Sara arc and we get to learn a lot about Mugen and Jin, and then the end where we should be seeing the, turns out less than enthralling Sunflower Samurai, but that's where we should get the real good. So I don't know, man. Like, it feels like we could have done something more with those two episodes to connect these or expand the story in a meaningful way. And it was just kind of a bummer.
I like Jin's storyline. I think he's got the most interesting storyline out of the three of them.
If anything, the end of his story is actually very good, I think.
Yes, he has the most solid sort of arc where, we've known for because they actually, and you know why? Because they've actually built it for the entire series, right? We know he's on the run because he killed his master. Okay, so we learn little bits and pieces here and there. Some people try to stop him from the old school, blah, blah, blah. And then, we finally learn at the very end that we know he fought his master and killed him, but we didn't know that he was attacked essentially in his sleep by his master and defended himself and killed him before he even knew who he was fighting, essentially.
And
it was,
also that his master, this is a representation of the changing times during the Edo period. The question of Japanese history for the samurai was, what do you do with warriors in a time of peace? Right? There's nothing for these people to do. They are, because of the feudal system, getting paid to basically do nothing. And not only that, but there is an inherent conflict between the samurai class, which was the top class in society, and a class of merchants who are the lowest class, becoming much more wealthy than the samurai during this time of peace. So how can you square that, right? You have these people who should be elite who are poorer than the people who they look down upon. And what do you do? Like, and the answer is, well, you have to go into service of the shogunate as like assassins, basically, to kill the shogun's enemies. And Jin doesn't want to do that. And it becomes known, and therefore his master is told by the shogunate to kill him because they don't want him to be a threat. And they don't, he is upsetting the new order. And I think that's really interesting. It's really interesting. Why couldn't we play more into that?
Yeah. So we do. I feel like we do almost get a fully fleshed out storyline with Jin. Gene rather. He definitely has the best out of all of them. Mugen's storyline basically amounts to he did crimes and people are mad about the crimes he did. That's about it. And Food just is like, my dad left and I want to punch him.
I mean, I like some of the stuff with Mugen that they do. If you remember in the first episode that we watched for this show, so episode 14, and then later at the end, you actually see these weird spirits when he's almost dying a couple of times. You see him at the end of the show too. And these are called Pantu, and they're actually like Ryukyu native religion spirits of good luck. So I think it's interesting. Again, we're bringing in cultures from outside of traditional Japan, right? These were spirits that existed prior to the Japanese taking over of Okinawa and the rest of the Ryukyu Islands. So it shows, where he's from. I love the episode where he was illiterate, which again,
that was a funny subplot where
it was
he was
great.
Being taught to write and read. Yeah,
it was very funny.
And he fought the other graffiti artists essentially.
Yeah,
by writing.
I love the graffiti episode. It was awesome.
That was one of the better episodes. Yeah, for sure.
And this again, it's not because Mugen is dumb. It's because he's not ethnically Japanese, and he learns Japanese. But I believe that in the Ryukyu Islands they didn't even have a writing system at this time period. I'll check that. But this is something that he would have learned how to speak Japanese. But this was still a relatively separate kingdom at this point in time, even though it was nominally controlled by Japan. And so he wouldn't have learned, the point is if he grew up there, he would not have learned how to write Japanese during that time period or read Japanese. So it's cool that we get to see that. And I love the fact that we continue with these people who are on the fringes of society, right? Again, it ties back into the hip hop themes that we discussed in our first episode, which is that hip hop is an art that comes from minorities challenging power. Like, that's the origins of hip hop. As popular as it is now, that's not where it started, and that wasn't its purpose when it began. And what do we have? We have people on the fringes. We have, let's see, Christians who are persecuted, especially during the Tokugawa shogunate and the Edo period. Completely banned. These people were killed. They were crucified. The
storyline does like tie into that a little bit too, but only useless. It's a lot of tell don't show.
Sure, but I mean, you see the Christian people who are like living in secret on this island. You hear in the ends that the Christians cause these other people so many problems because the shogunate's going after them. One of the reasons that the Tokugawa shogunate closed the borders to Japan was because they were so annoyed by people proselytizing within Japan, and they wanted to control the populace, and they didn't want this new religion getting out of hand and challenging their power. And so you get that. You get disabled people. What do you do with this blind woman? What's her fate supposed to be? Because she's a musician, and later we find out she's like a Zatoichi-esque, blind warrior, which is again another trope. And Samurai Champloo leans into the tropes that have been set down of samurai cinema, which is Zatoichi, the blind samurai.
That's the intent.
There's literally an episode in the first 13 that is Yojimbo, the Kurosawa movie, of the two warring gangster, organized crime gangs in the city, right? It is Yojimbo. They call, and they are also just, Yojimbo is the word for bodyguard. They're calling people Yojimbo if you watch the sub version, right? So, these are all things that take place, but the hip hop themes continue, but we just don't get a satisfying resolution to any of this, and that's the big bummer.
Yeah, it's what's funny is that right now we're in this interesting trend where everybody wants to do live action remakes of anime. And I generally hate that. I generally don't think it's a good idea, because if you already like the anime, just watch that and make something new. We've had very mixed results, obviously. Like Cowboy Bebop was an absolute travesty. But the One Piece live action is really good. But this is a show, I will say, I'd kind of like to see a live action remake of, because they could take all of the great concepts in this show and actually construct a good story out of it. Like, with everything having the totality of the work already done, you could do a much better job of telling a story, because there's a lot of great concepts in this show, again, of a story. There's a lot of great, like, beginnings of stories in here, and like bits and pieces. It just needs some polish. So I think with the right people, you could do a really cool live action version of this, and I would say one that would actually end up being a better story than this one. So, you could
also do some really cool stunt work with, like, the breakdancing fighting style of Mugen. Totally. And like, I think you could do amazing stuff with this in live action. It'd be great. I agree.
Isn't it weird though? But it actually makes sense. It's weird to say, but I kind of wish we could get a live action remake of Samurai Champloo. I think it could be better than the anime. But it's so strange. It's so weird to even think that, but it's true. But like,
no, I agree, because this is just a case of the underlying concept is incredibly strong, and if you take the good parts of the execution of it, you could make this significantly better while changing the ending very dramatically. Like, I'm not I like. Totally. Here's what I like. I like the characters of Mugen and Jin. I like them a lot. I like their character arcs quite a bit. But I am not married to the central plot premise about Fu's dad being the Sunflower Samurai. So you can change that into being something more interesting and bring in some of the cooler ideas from these episodes, including the mixing of the old and the new, like the Van Gogh being inspired by the woodblock print of Fu. You can add more things like that. I think that would be super cool.
You totally could, and I think you could do a much more interesting. You could just do a lot better with Fu than is done in the anime. You can actually make her into a real character. Like, what if at the end, what if at the end, like, the Sunflower Samurai, like, isn't her dad, but it is the person who killed her dad and drove her and her mom away, and then her mom died early and all that, and she finds out that she's, like, connected to this Christian community, and then she has to, like, wrestle with, well, am I even a part of this religion? What do I believe? Should I seek revenge if this is how I was raised? Like, give her, like, a real sort of, like, crisis of personality, or not crisis of, I'm trying to avoid the use the term crisis of faith, because the crisis is, should she have faith to begin with? And so it's like, I think you could do a lot of interesting stuff with her character, from a drama level, and also just a personality level. You just make her straight up a better character, a more likable character. But yeah, do the live action remake. Somebody who's talented. If you're not talented, please don't do it.
Also,
leave it alone.
A lot of the female characters could literally just be consolidated into Fu, like we said last time, which is that it felt like they were afraid to make Fu interesting, so they just introduced additional female characters that are more interesting than Fu to keep Fu kind of like a blank slate, or the straight man.
But I mean, if samey setups, and so
if you think about the cool female characters, so the Sarah, the blind assassin, you have the Jin's prostitute from the last episode. In this group of episodes, you have the secret police officer that Mugen gets involved with, who's posing as a prostitute. Like, Fu could be combined with one or all of these characters and become much more interesting as a central plot point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you need to make her like a badass secret assassin or something like that. I think you can still have plenty of those other characters in there, but you just need to, I would say, pare down and probably combine some of them, because a big problem with the show is that the setups for a lot of episodes become very samey. They go to a town, Mugen and Jin run off, somehow become embroiled with the local prostitutes, and they fight some crime guys. And that is the majority of the episodes in the show, is that basic premise. And meanwhile, Fu either eats a lot, or she just gets separated, or she either
She
eats
gets
a lot,
kidnapped.
gets kidnapped, or goes and meets a nice person that she kind of likes and takes care of, and then that person ends up being like dead or evil or something like that, you know? So yeah, I think you could combine a lot of that stuff, but you could also use some of it to make her more interesting too. Because I think you're right. I think they are like afraid to have anything like too mature in a bad way happen to her, you know, and that's fine. If you don't want any of that stuff to happen to her, that's fine. But you need to give her something else. You know, you need to give her something, right? So it's they're just it just is missing a lot. You know, this is like the Swiss cheese of anime, right? Where the cheese that's there tastes pretty good, but in the average slice, you're still missing a lot of cheese. There could be a lot more there, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I agree. Like I really was encouraged by the seeds that they planted in the first 13 episodes, but just it feels like not very much grew out of it, and that taking another pass at this would be an extremely good idea. Because to this day,
I like the concept.
yeah, I mean, to this day, this is why we have the Watanabe mode in Ghost of Yōtei. It's because this is so iconic and because it is so recognizable. And if you see this, it sticks with you forever. It's not forgettable at all. It's not a piece of media that you watch and you like, well, 2 years, I'm not going to remember that. I mean, DoA and I were talking about the last time we watched this was 20 years ago, and we wanted to revisit it. And it makes sense that people are still inspired by it and they want to put this mode in the game. DoA, you said you're going to play the game this way. You know what I mean?
I still will.
It's attractive.
Yeah, I still will. I mean, and the reason I will is because it's got a lot of style. I like the style. I love the music in this show. Man, there's like so much great and unique music in this show. It's fantastic. And, you know, no surprise, that's what they wanted to pull from it for the game, right? The music, that's the best part of it. But beyond that, visually, this show has a ton of style in the best ways, right? So this is like I'd say this is almost like one of the pinnacles in anime of like all style and very little substance, you know?
I will talk about one other thing that is likely to have an effect potentially on Ghost of Yōtei, which is that there is actually an Ainu character within Samurai Champloo. And the Ainu are the native people of Hokkaidō. And just like, you know, Mugen is one of the native people of the Ryukyu Kingdom. These people are ethnically different from the Wajin, which are the ethnically Japanese people that we think about today. The Ainu existed in Hokkaidō, and especially because Ghost of Yōtei is taking place in 1603, like 99% of Hokkaidō during this time period would have been Ainu. And you actually see in the shots of Ghost of Yōtei that have been released in the trailers that Atsu, the main character, is speaking with Ainu people a lot of the time. And we get to see Kotan, which is an Ainu village being burned, because this character, you know, is coming from this burning village. And this actually has a lot of historical context to it, because just like the Native Americans, the Ainu were very susceptible to disease. And smallpox was a disease that was introduced by the ethnic Japanese that absolutely devastated the Ainu population, the same way that smallpox devastated the indigenous cultures of America. And so them having a diseased village that they're burning down, I think, is probably pretty historically accurate. And the other thing that they talk about is that the Ainu man is being chased by the Matsume domain. And this is the time period in which the Matsume clan was given exclusive trading rights to the Ainu in Hokkaidō. So when the Tokugawa shogunate formed, that's when, at the end of the Warring States period, when all of the clans were fighting against each other in the larger Japanese islands, when it was unified and they were at peace, this is when the shogun says, okay, now we're going to start looking at Hokkaidō. Now we're going to turn our gaze northwards and try and gain control of that island, because honestly, they were just very afraid of the Russians. What they didn't want is for the Russians to come in and take over the Hokkaido and Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. And then later they fought the Russo-Japanese War, but that was much later. But anyway, that was several hundred years later. But anyway, the point is like, this is where the Matsume clan starts to really project power into Hokkaido. And so it becomes very plausible that something like this would happen to an Ainu village in that time period. So this is something that in Ghost of Yōtei will probably be very relevant, because
I thought that episode was pretty decent too. I felt like
the two-parter. It was a two-parter as well.
I felt like I care more about Okuru than I do about Fu. I think he's got a better storyline in those two episodes than she has in the entire series.
Yeah, he also has the Ainu, one of the Ainu instruments on his back that he's playing. He's wearing Ainu clothing with the traditional Ainu designs. So it's cool. And again, this is about the people on the fringes of society. They had the Ryukyu Kingdom guy in Mugen. Then they introduced Okuru as the Ainu person. So I really want to like this show, DoA, because I think it's doing super cool stuff with Japanese history. But
yeah,
it toys around and does something like fascinating for a couple episodes, but there's nothing that binds this all together, and the underlying plot just fucking face plants at the end.
Yeah. I mean, all style, no substance. Like, it's or very little substance. There is a little bit of substance here and there, but I think it was very ambitious and a really cool idea, and they just don't stick the execution. And like, I remember my thoughts on it to review my thoughts going into the second watch through. I remember liking it. I remember it being cool, but I also remember it being, not as good as a lot of the other shows I'd watched. I remember I didn't remember like anything of the plot. I remembered zero of the plot coming into it, which should have been a clue to myself that there maybe wasn't really a lot there to remember. I remember there being the Sunflower Samurai and they're looking for him. I seriously could not even remember who the Sunflower Samurai was when I started this rewatch through.
I didn't remember anything about it, really.
It was a surprise to me again. I had totally forgotten, and I remember now I'm like, oh yeah, I was probably disappointed back then too. But yeah, so it is just that. It's just cool music, cool visuals, just very little story, and very little character development, which is really unfortunate because everything else is so neat about it. So I think it was an interesting attempt at making something that didn't quite pan out, So time to do the live action remake is what I'm saying. It's never been a better time.
In conclusion,
Netflix is just like, Netflix is so ready, They were
I'm
like, okay,
just,
we screwed up Cowboy Bebop, but we can do better. We can do better.
I'm just super surprised, DoA, because it feels like they really copped out at the end, whereas Watanabe just didn't cop out at the end of Bebop. Like, nobody thought they would just like, spoilers if you haven't seen Cowboy Bebop. I don't want to spoil this for you, but you should turn this off right now before I say the words that I'm about to say. Nobody thought they were going to kill Spike at the end, right? And that was a real gut punch and a real surprise. And I think Cowboy Bebop has such an incredibly strong ending, and it's such a memorable ending as well. Yeah. Like, you'd be hard pressed having watched that and not be able to just immediately visualize that shot of Spike with the bang at the end. It's so beautiful and it's so iconic. And so for them just to pull all the punches and be like, lol, plot armor, everybody lives, feels real weird.
I don't want to make you mad, but Watanabe is on record saying that in his mind Spike lived.
Whatever, it's ambiguous. You know what I mean?
I know. And I think I take it as he died too, because I think that's a better ending to the story, and I think that feels like what's more, implied in the scene. So I think he died too. We are all too familiar these days with directors and authors going in and retroactively saying things about their characters that are either just not true or not indicated in any way, shape, or form in the movie or the book, or just going in and adding a big song and dance number in Return of the Jedi, for instance. Like, there is this trend of people going back and messing with things that were good, that were really good, and making them worse. So, or just saying things for points with a community. But like, it's just, that was so perfect. And here's another problem with Samurai Champloo, is Mugen is too much like Spike, where we're supposed to believe he's not like Spike, right? where, you know, he kind of looks like Spike. The way they draw him definitely does resemble Spike. They've got similar crazy haircuts. It's the same voice actor. They've got that same sort of cocksureness in English. Yeah, I'm saying mostly in the English version of it, in the subtitle version, dubbed version of it. I just got back. I'm so tired. I just got back from an event yesterday and I'm dead. But like, when I watched through this, like, I have a really hard time detaching my brain from Spike when I see Mugen, you know? And that,
I
like,
think they
that's also
behave
something
very
that bothers
differently,
me.
so I kind of disagree with you. Visually, they have
Yes and
similarities,
no.
but no, they really. I mean, Mugen is so much more wild, so much of a hair trigger. Like
I'm not saying
Spike
they're
is
exactly the
very
same.
laid
I'm
back. I
saying
think they're
it's
very
too
different
close.
personality
Sure.
wise.
I think there's too much similarity for me to not think about it at all, you know? I think it is distracting. Leave a comment in the comments if you agree or disagree. I'm very curious. I'm curious if, and specifically if you've watched the dubbed version. If you watch the subtitle version, I'm sure it'd be easier to separate the two. But if you watch the dubbed version and, you know, it's the same voice actor, I think it makes it especially difficult to separate the two.
Well,
But
Watanabe can't be blamed for that because
maybe
that was
that's just
not
me.
his original vision. So
I know, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me, but like that's what happened when I watched it, right? So, you know, I would imagine I'm not the only person that had that effect from watching it dubbed. But let me know.
in any case, we move on. This is definitely the worst thing that we've watched in terms of inspiration, unfortunately, for Ghost
Yeah.
of Yōtei. All the movies are great.
And the thing is, I want to say one last thing is that this show is less bad than it is frustrating. It's not a
That's
bad
true.
show, but it will produce frustration in you because you will be
You want it
you'll
to be
think
better.
yeah, you want to be better and you feel like you're being set up to have like a really great experience, and then the story really lets you down. So yeah, it's less bad and more frustrating, I think.
Yeah, and we are going to end next week. This will be after the game of Ghost of Yōtei is released on October 2nd, guys. Will be our last video. But if you're playing along with us, you can enjoy the last inspiration film, which is Lone Wolf and Cub, Sword of Vengeance. This is based off of the very, 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 very famous, extremely long-running manga series Lone Wolf and Cub. There is also a series of films that were released in the 1970s that are inspired from the manga, just like Lady Snowblood was inspired by a manga. So if you like this movie, you can go watch the rest of the series of movies as well, similar to Lady Snowblood, or if you watch Zatoichi, like similar to that too. We're not doing Zatoichi as part of this because I had to pick movies that I think were more directly inspirational, or Sucker Punch had literally said were inspirational for Ghost of Yōtei. Zatoichi was one of those, but I thought it was kind of the least, you know, connected, as it
It's
were.
a difficult watch too. That one's not for everybody, I'll say.
No, I mean Zatoichi's fun. Whatever, it's fun. So the you know these are the films we chose. So that'll be our last one after the game is released. So you guys can look forward to that. We'll see you next week.